Good evening. Today I would like to call to order the October 1st Committee of the Whole meeting. First, I will start by reading the notice. The public will be allowed to attend at a reduced rate of 50% capacity of the Professional Development Center meeting room space. Once the capacity has been reached, admission into this meeting will be closed. All audience members will be required to wear a mask at all times. Masks will be available upon request. All audience members will undergo temperature screenings before entering the meeting room. The Committee of the Whole meeting scheduled October 1st, 2020 at 5:00 p.m. will be streamed live via Microsoft Teams events. A link to watch the event can be found on board docs located on the school board's website. A period for written public comment will be provided before the meeting as well as before each action is taken by the board on an action item. Individuals wishing to make a public comment about any of the posted action items will need to click on the agenda item in board docs and submit via the highlighted public comment hyperlink on the agenda item's details. Upon the closing of the comments, the board vice president will read into the record the public comments that have been submitted. Good afternoon, everyone, and we will now call our meeting to order with an invocation to be led by School Board Member Don Collins and the Pledge of Allegiance to be read by School Board Member Mark Ballou.
Dear Lord, we are in some tumultuous times today, whether it's political or health care or even juggling education during a time of all this turmoil. God, I first and foremost pray peace in the hearts of all, our staff, my colleagues on the board, and our teachers, students, and families. Let us come together in a cohesive way where we may not agree on every single detail, but we have enough peace in our hearts to allow us a little bit of trust as we work together to make sure our children get the education they deserve. All these things we pray and ask. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. At this time, we'll have the roll call. Madam Secretary.
District 7, President Gode.
Here.
District 3, Vice President Howard.
Present.
District 1, Mr. Blue.
Here.
District 2, Mr. Lannis. District 4, Ms. Collins.
Present.
District 5, Ms. Ware Jackson. District 6, Ms. Dyson. District 8, Ms. Bernard.
Present.
District 9, Mr. Tatman.
Thank you. We have a quorum. At this time, we will receive for information only an update from updates from our superintendent to be given by Mr. Adam Smith. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Vice President, Mr. Howard. A quick update on the tremendous work our secondary team has been able to do on reopening schools in a hybrid model in grades 6 through 12. Our middle and high school staff welcome students back who selected the hybrid model to their campuses on Monday and Tuesday, with students' names ending in A through K. While in the hybrid model, those middle and high school students who will continue to receive virtual instruction on Wednesday with deep cleaning on school sites for the second group to attend on Thursday and Friday. Also, I would like to remind parents that on Monday, October 5th, elementary students will transition into a 5-day face-to-face learning model for those students who did not select the 100% virtual model. Safety, as always, for our students and staff are our top priority. Therefore, our district will continue to lend support and visit schools. When you have the opportunity to visit our schools, you would find that the social distancing poster stickers are posted, properly posted, proper use of PPEs and masks are worn on students in grades 3 through 12 and all faculty members. Just a reminder, there is still time to find more information about our magnet schools. The Magnet School Virtual Showcase is going on this week, which is the launch of the Magnet School application period for the 2021-22 school year. Please contact your local magnet school of your choice or visit their websites at www.ebrmagnet.org. Open enrollment information. Open enrollment information for healthcare benefits starts today through October 30th. The Blue Community Health Plan design will change to match the design plan for the core plan. Due to the planned design change, premiums for this healthcare plan will significantly decrease. However, the premiums for the buy-up and core plan will be increasing. All other benefit plans and premiums will remain the same for the 2021 year. Open enrollment information can be found at www.ebrbenefits.com, which includes 4 video presentations discussing health care insurance as well as other benefits offered by the district. Very important information for our high school seniors. ACT testing will take place October 6th at all district high schools. This test administration cycle makes up for the canceled test date last March when schools were closed. As March testing historically focuses on juniors, this test cycle will target high school seniors. Due to social distancing and test security operation, the majority of our high school students will engage in virtual learning for students in grades 9 through 11 on this day in order to provide the optimal testing environment for our ACT testers. This day will be a full day for seniors. Transportation, trial nutrition, high school programs, and the accountability staff are collaborating to finalize logistics for this day. Parents should receive communications from their child's high school regarding information about schedules for that day. And at this time, Vice President Howard, I would like to invite Mr. Cochler to come forth to introduce our new resident manager for East Baton Rouge Parish School System for Aramark.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Good afternoon, Mr. Goday. Vice President Howard, thank you for the opportunity to talk about Aramark changes. As was just announced, we are making a leadership change here in light of the challenges facing sanitizing, disinfecting schools. It was necessary to bring in a different leader who is going to be focused on detail, community, working in partnership with our private companies. And I'd like to introduce and welcome Demetrius Wells. Demetrius Wells lives in the community. He's been a part of the Aramark company for 12 years and recently worked at Blue Cross Blue Shield. And so if you would, Mr. Wells, please let the folks know a little bit about your background and your vision and mission for what we expect to accomplish here at East Baton Rouge Parish Schools. Thank you.
Good evening, President, Vice President, members of the board. Like Leon said, my name is Demetrius Wells. Originally, I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I came here in 1987 to attend Southern University. After graduating there, I went on to LSU. As I started my career at LSU, I started working in the community at the Argosy Casino in very different positions. I stayed there for 12 years. Most of my background there is hospitality and facility services as well. So for the last 24 years, my career has been in Baton Rouge, in facilities, in hospitality. So I understand what's going on right now. During this pandemic crisis, the key is, what kind of protocols, what kind of things you have in place to make sure that, we get the job done. I think we have some strong bones. We have to grow on. This is a new pandemic. This is a new thing for everyone. My goal is operational leader. I'm always in the property, on the property. My goal is to always get out in the community, get out to a school, see what's going on, be proactive rather than reactive. You always can reach me. If you need me, give me a call. I'm in the community all the time. My family is in the community. I have a wife, a daughter. My wife is in the school system. My daughter's in the school system as well. And I have many friends and families in the school system as well and within the community as well. So my background and my roots are in the Baton Rouge area. I look forward to being here, retiring here as well. Like I said, my mission here is to tweak the programs that we have and make sure that they work and they operational for the best of everyone. I mean, I understand what you guys are feeling as far as you're concerned with the school, the teachers are concerned about their students and their own health. At Blue Cross Blue Shield, we had issues as well, and we corrected those problems. We never had a situation within the building because of the protocols that we put in place, the high touch points, much like what we have over in East Baton Rouge School Parish. So I understand what's going on. I am an operational leader, and that's what you're going to get from me. I'm always in the system. I'm always in the community to make sure that we achieve these goals. That's pretty much it about me. If anybody have any questions for me, I'd be glad to answer those.
Mr. Wells
Sam?
or Mr. Copeland, would you share some of the organizational changes that you've made in the past couple of weeks as far as with cleaning and ensuring that our facilities are up to par?
Yeah, great question. I'll lower this a bit. So we, the first week we had that Wednesday deep clean. We probably didn't hit on all cylinders the way we needed to, and we received some really positive feedback. And we set up a system where all deficiencies are reported to our service response center via text message, emails, et cetera. And then we instituted a daily check-in call with all of our cleaning companies at night so that we could work those deficiencies. And since we've done that, we've seen a dramatic drop in the number of issues that we've had. Second thing we've done is we had to get more visibility out into the schools. And so all of our functional teams, our operations teams, folks that maybe had never been in the building for a while, we started visiting schools at night and acknowledging, one, where you're using the right products. We've got the Oxyver, we got the Virex, very effective sanitary disinfectants, but were they being used to the point that they should be? And then we realized that we just need to do some more training, some coaching and reinforcement because we are working with people, okay? And sometimes people execute well, sometimes they don't. And what I'm learning, what I'm seeing is by working in partnership with the companies, we're beginning to gel and become better and deliver a better product. So those are a lot of the things we've been doing.
And I would just like to share, as we transition into a 5-day week for elementary school students, that we will continue to have that same deep cleaning on Wednesdays. Thank you, Mr. Copeland. Vice President, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are there any questions, comments from the board? My request to speak is not available, so April will be calling on people who need to speak on any topics. So, Ms. Collins. All right. Thank you, Ms. Collins. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you, guys. We will now move on to our quarterly report from the Innovation Network. Dr. Petrie, Mr. Perry.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Good evening, Mr. Smith, Social Superintendent, Vice President, Mr. Howard, and President Goday, and members of the board. Tonight, we want to give a brief update on the Innovation Network. The Innovation Network aligns to the vision and mission of the East Baton Rouge Parish School System. The Innovation Network is here to help schools implement high-quality curriculum, develop leaders, provide instructional coaching, and connect with our stakeholders to formulate a collective vision focused on preparing students beyond high school. You got the PowerPoint? Can y'all see the PowerPoint? Okay. Okay. I apologize. Okay. All right, so once again, the vision and mission of East Baton Rouge Parish Schools also align with the mission and vision of the Innovation Network. Next slide, please. All right, we see that in year one, our original goal for year one was that each school would have a 4-point growth target. In our first year, we see that the Innovation Network had an average score of 5.3 points. The progress index average for the network was a 7.5, which shows that we're actually growing kids. 93% of those schools had positive progress index growth, and of that 93%, 65% obtained a B letter grade, which means that they were actually growing those students. 3 schools had letter grade changes. That was Progress Elementary, Park Forest Elementary, and Bel Air High School. Capital Elementary was also recognized as a top gains honoree in the state. Next slide, please. Part of the effectiveness of the work that has been done has been the focus on limited number of priorities. In the first year, we didn't just ensure everyone had Tier 1 materials, but we empowered teachers and leaders to actually use those Tier 1 materials. The LDOE praised the work of the network as a bright spot strategy for the state last November, noting that we didn't just adopt high-quality curriculum, but we built this work with our teachers. Also, we see that the network has also hosted in October and February, hosted several districts to come in and actually watch the work of the Innovation Network. This was also part of a study conducted by USC, which lifted the work of the network. Next slide. Support for leaders. How do we support our leaders? First, we prioritize the learning and development of all educators, sharing best practices with our leaders. Secondly, we customize campus-specific support for best practices, coaching educators to implement best practices at their respective sites. And thirdly, we place emphasis on school leaders being the instructional leaders of the campus, observing instruction weekly and coaching them on providing high-quality support and feedback to teachers. All right, this slide discusses how we address the learning loss. So the first phase of this piece is we work with our leaders on the outside circle on purposeful planning, which means aligning the standards and shifts to learning targets. Next shift is we help leaders to unpack those standards, working side by side to help them build knowledge of the standards and the shifts. The next part of that rotation is classroom observations and progress monitoring. So we actually go in the classroom with the leaders side by side and calibrate walkthroughs and again discuss the alignment of the standards, targets, and activities. Next piece of this rotation is, can you go back one slide? The next piece of this rotation is the debrief and reflection piece with our leaders. So we debrief on what was seen in the classroom and discuss next steps. And the last part of this cycle is support. How do we provide specific support for each site? Now, in the middle circle, we see that we have diagnostic, interventions, progress monitoring, and adjusting instruction. So in the middle cycle is how do we measure this learning loss? So in diagnostics, we use diagnostic and our interim assessments in PLCs with teachers and leaders to unpack diagnostic data and plan for learning loss using resources from the PD, such as ANET resources and our professional development. We also use interventions. We discuss how to build those scaffolds in the curriculum to address unfinished learning. The next piece of that phase is progress monitoring, where we use the assessments from ELA and math to measure students' learning of the standards. And lastly, we adjust instruction based on the data to consult the curriculum to address the unfinished learning. On our next slide, what's next? We are proud of the early results. We wish we would have had year 2 and year 3, of course, but research tells us right now that the support and innovations we are providing are helping to increase student achievement in the network. And as we continue to accelerate learning for students, we are prioritizing how we adjust and pivot Tier 1 instruction in real time to meet the needs of all students. And we have a small video from a principal who's going to share her experience with the network.
couple months ago, we did a PD, and Kristen showed a video. On the video, we actually got a chance to see the teaching, and when I first saw that, I was like, oh my God, that's a 4, that's great teaching. I wasn't really focusing on the standards because I'm looking at the pedagogy and the strategy she's utilizing. She's doing everything that everybody says. So then Kristen comes back and she's like, okay, well, you guys, I want y'all to look at the standards. And when I looked at the standards, the teacher did not address the standards. And so that was an aha moment for me, because then I reflected and I thought about the fact that a couple years ago I had an excellent teacher. Excellent. Always, every time I went in there, the class was engaging, the students were performing, there was discussion going on. However, her data never supported what I saw in the classroom. So at that point I said, this whole time I'm looking at pedagogy and I'm looking at what they should do, but I'm not looking at if they're teaching to the depth of the standards.
And all this work could not be done without our support from our partners. At this time, I will turn it over to my colleague to discuss our partnerships.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. So that was a really good segue into our partnerships with Innovation Network. The goal of the Innovation Network is to increase student achievement and school success. Through teamwork and partnerships, our school leaders set rigorous but attainable goals. Our vision as executive directors is to support, mentor, and inspire school leaders to lead by example to improve teaching and learning on their respective campuses. As you look to the right of the slide, you will notice our partners include ANET, which is the Achievement Network, Empower Schools, Metromorphosis, City Year Baton Rouge, and then also One Goal Graduation. Next slide, please. When we think about district leaders, Mr. Perry and myself, we work closely together with school leaders to obtain school achievement through resources and support in conjunction with partnerships. Next slide, please. So as we look at the partnerships in depth, our first one, which is ANET, the what would be the purposeful planning, just like Mr. Perry stated, unpacking standards, classroom observations, professional development, and coaching. The why, when we think about the partnership with ANET, includes, number one, to increase student achievement. We know that's the goal, the ultimate goal. And then also teacher support, and as you notice, Mr. Perry and Ms. Stewart talked about the leader support, so that's very important. Empower Schools. All Innovation Network schools benefit from the resources and connections to best practices in Louisiana and across the U.S. Networking is so important as it relates to moving our district. Strategic advice, implementation support, coordination of the community advisory panel, support with assessment and evaluation, and of course, advocacy and shared accountability. The why would be to ensure high-quality implementation of the Innovation Network strategy and advance the district's strategic goals. Let me stop there because I want to be clear as it relates to that alignment. When we think about the Innovation Network and we think about the district goals, they work hand in hand, meaning that we want to decrease the number of CIR schools, our D and F schools in our district. So I just wanted to be clear about the alignment and then hence to improve student performance. Next slide, please. Our next partner, which I mentioned earlier, is City Year Baton Rouge. What we've done as an innovation network, we know that it's important to look at the needs of the individual schools and tailor that support based on the data. So as you can see under the who, as it relates to City Year Baton Rouge, would be Brookstown Middle, Glen Oaks Middle High, Claiborne, Howell Park Elementary. So within City Year Baton Rouge, when we look at these schools, there are anywhere from 10 to 12 core members. These members are anywhere from 18 to 24 years of age. They're placed on these campuses to assist with academics, to mentor. They can assist with whole group, individual, small group assistance, and then, of course, we're in a pandemic. So when we think about virtual learning and our distance education learning, it's very critical to be able to have our 18 through 24-year-olds to assist with engaging activities as it relates to technology and virtual learning. Then the social emotional learning piece is very critical. Our kids have had learning loss between, 7 months now. So educating the whole child is very critical as well. So that ABC support, which would be your attendance, behavior, and course credit, that's very important that the mentors and the core members to assist with that piece. And then PBIS. Our why is school, achievement, and culture and climate. Moving on to one goal graduation, again, looking at the data, we made decisions based on, within the Innovation Network, which schools could we best support. So we're looking at Tara High School has already started the process with working with one goal graduation. Bel Air, we're attempting to start that process in the spring, and hopefully, depending on funding and depending on after we progress monitor these programs and partnerships, we would like to go to Glen Oaks High School in the fall. The whole purpose and the what with One Goal graduation includes build a post-secondary capacity of teachers and leaders to advise students during critical years through a credit-bearing course delivered during the school day. It offers a system-wide solution that integrates a proven post-secondary success model from district goals and master schedules to teacher training and school culture. When I think about the goals, there's a transition for year 1 and year 2. When we think about year 1, that's the 11th grade year. Year 2 would be the 12th grade year, and of course we know our goal is to increase the graduation rate in EBR, or within the Innovation Network. So with that being said, this program goes beyond 12th grade, so they're actually helping follow those students for post-secondary. So let's look at the why. And we want to ensure students across the school community achieve their greatest post-secondary aspirations. Next slide, please. Lastly, we have metamorphosis. You'll see metamorphosis listed twice, and the reason for that is going back to the data and looking at the needs and tailoring what our school leaders need within the Innovation Network. We were able to take a look at Capitol Middle, Brookstown Middle, Glen Oaks Middle High, using the EWS, which is the Early Warning System. What that is to assist school leaders to identify and track students who have an elevated risk of dropping out before completion of high school. They also identify interventions and strategies that help those students course correct and attain their high school diploma. So moving on to the why, of course, graduation rate. I'm sure you've heard that repeatedly. We want to graduate more of our students. The next piece for metamorphosis, you can see under the who, all Innovation Network schools will benefit from metamorphosis and the partnership with family school partnerships. I keep going back to the pandemic, COVID-19. We have talked about distance education learning. We've had the hybrid model, virtual, 100% virtual. We have to get the family and the school involved. There has to be a community, a partnership. So with that being said, Metamorphosis will assist school leaders to create a strategy that focuses on ensuring that families and communities are partners in the education of every student. And then also there's ICANN under the umbrella of Metamorphosis, which is the Innovation Community Action Network, to use the resources already available through different organizations to create a collective dynamic impact in education regarding the areas of recruitment, retention of talent. So we know D&F schools, and I like to say at promise instead of at risk, we want to attract, maintain, and sustain our teachers within the Innovation Network. Now, this is not to say that our Human Resources Department is not doing an excellent job. This is all collaborative and collective. We are partnering with the Innovation Network, Human Resources, District Leaders, and ICANN, which falls under the umbrella of Metromorphosis. So I just wanted to be clear about that. We're all working together to not only recruit and retain talent, but also the Family School Partnership and socially relevant and responsive pedagogy. And lastly, under the Y, Family School Partnerships equals student achievement, human capital support, and then also reduce attrition of highly effective teachers, and then also being mindful of that culturally responsive pedagogy support. Next slide, please. So I've said all the different partners within the Innovation Network, and I know you're probably thinking, well, how do we know what we're doing is actually working? How do we monitor that? How are you progress monitoring those particular partnerships? So as you can see there, the first one is monthly check-ins. We have had monthly check-ins starting in June, July, August, and we've already scheduled meetings all the way until the end of May of 2021. Focus groups, data collection, all this is ongoing. Indicators of risk tracking document, teacher survey data, school leader data, social emotional learning survey data, data presentations quarterly, and then also restorative practices data tracker. Next slide, please. Which leads me into, we've talked about out-of-district partnerships, but we also work collaboratively within our district, within the Innovation Network. So we have partnered with Ms. Tamara Johnson, who is the Executive Director of Alternative Schools, but she's also the restorative practices, I like to say, guru. So what we've done is we've partnered with her, we've teamed up with her so that all of our Innovation Network schools can benefit from restorative practices, and the goal and the purpose and the why would be to decrease the number of referrals, suspensions, expulsions, and increase attendance. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Ms. Tamara Johnson.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to share some information as requested about restorative practices. We are, every year, our handbook committee in the district, our Rights and Responsibility Handbook Committee includes discipline as a part of that handbook. And alternative programs supports those students who are suspended and expelled to continue their educational opportunities in alternative schools. But a part of our efforts are proactive in support of keeping students in their traditional schools with proactive efforts. If you all can remember, we made a commitment in our 2018 tax vote Proposition 2 to implement restorative practices. So last school year, we did have a pilot with some select schools in our district. We implemented some of the practices before we launched our year one so that we would have some lessons learned within our district. In no way is restorative practices a replacement for suspensions and expulsions. It is another set of tools in the toolbox of our educators to support building relationships. So if we take a look at, I'm not sure, we were on the same presentation as Innovation Network, so we'll keep going. What is restorative practices? Restorative practices is a set, it's not a program, it's a set of strategies used to build or repair relationships that have been harmed. 80% of restorative practices usage should be on the proactive end with building those relationships, using effective statements when adults are dealing with students and students are dealing with students, using those effective questions that teachers and our administrators are trained, using those restorative circles, and adult self-reflections. It is not a program. Again, it is strategies that we train our educators to use in hopes that those proactive measures, not in hopes, but research shows that those proactive measures produce lower suspension and expulsion rates because we've invested in building those relationships up front. And if there is a situation where there's harm, there is a way to repair those relationships. If there's an opportunity to do that, there's a way to repair those relationships using those strategies. So our schools that are implementing restorative practices are all 13 Innovation Network schools. I'm not sure, we're on slide 4 now. I can take it back if you all want to see the slides as we go, but year 1 schools, we have 24 schools, and we plan to phase in more schools. Those 24 schools are our Innovation Network schools, our alternative schools, and there are some other schools that elected to voluntarily be a part of that. And we have, those schools are Westdale Middle, Woodlawn Middle, Liberty High, Broadmoor High, and Scotlandville High. So with our implementation, next slide please, we had principles because one of our lessons learned through our pilot is one of the most important factors with implementation is our commitment from school leaders to participate. So we held a session in which school leaders made a commitment to participate, as well as had an onboarding session so they would know what training looks like, goal setting looks like, and progress monitoring those goals, what all of that looked like. So our school teams that are participating since last board meeting when we approved training, we've had over 70 people trained in our school teams. Our survey data shows that those participants enjoyed the training and felt like they've left away with a set of tools that they can use on their school campus. Our school leaders were also informed of the data review process in which they're taking up to 4 years of data, suspension, expulsion, infraction data, and they're setting goals. We're also helping them to monitor those goals quarterly, and when they meet those goals, they receive rewards. Some of the rewards they receive are the t-shirt and the professional learning book as a part of the training. So they receive that, all participants receive that. But as a part of their meeting their goals, the school receives a medal for restorative practices and a gold medal holder so that they can hang those medals on and they can post it in the hallway or in the foyer so that visitors and people around can know that we are a restorative school and we've met our goal for making our climate and culture in our school more positive. Sustaining our efforts. We have invested in a group of people in our district, and I must commend Mr. Shamlin. The iCare team started off with 2 individuals in our district years ago that were restorative practice trainers. But we know a district our size, in order to sustain efforts, we have to build capacity within. And so we've invested in credentialing several people in our district to become licensed trainers by International Institute of Restorative Practices to provide that face-to-face training. The trainings that we have offered thus far were virtual trainings, but as we move into more face-to-face training, we will be able to handle the capacity of adding more schools in a district our size. So that's it for our implementation. We have more trainings coming up, and we can't wait to share out our progress monitoring results and reward principals in a setting such as the board meeting or principals meetings for their efforts in improving culture and climate in schools.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. At this time, we'll take comments from the board. Ms. Collins.
And Tamara, this is really probably not even a question for you, but the presentation is reminding me about our commitment that we verbalized. We didn't vote on it, but it was a commitment to review our zero tolerance policy. And I was wondering where we are in the process of going through and preparing to not clean up, but take a different approach.
Yeah, I'll speak to that briefly. We've had a lot of discussion. A few of my discussions have been with board members about reviewing zero tolerance policy. Law requires certain things be in place, and so the first steps, and I've actually requested a meeting with external counsel to begin discussing what is actually modifiable and what we are actually required to keep. And so that would be the first step. That's something we're looking at. We've also talked about, and I've had this discussion with Mr. Smith and Mr. Nikes, convening a committee to look at that issue as a potential equity issue and how we approach it in terms of students and how we apply it. And so it's not just the rule, but it's also how the rule may be applied, the protocol. So we're reviewing those things, and I'll provide an update for the board as we kind of get into it. My perspective is we put together a committee through this year of people, constituents and people who have a stake in this to kind of provide feedback to us and then make decisions based on what the law will allow us to do and what the board will approve. And so we'll go through that process in detail.
And might I recommend including folks from the restorative justice field, for lack of a better term, because sometimes we used to doing things a certain way, and even being aware of what you can and cannot change. If you're used to looking at it a certain way, you may not realize creative ways within the rule of law to more effectively address things outside of a zero tolerance policy, because we all know the stats show zero tolerance really does not work. And so I'm really excited that you're working on, that we've begun to work on that, and I look forward to hearing more.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Thank you. Am I working? Okay, here I am. Thank you, Ms. Collins. Mr. Goder.
Yes, thank you. For the presenters, thank you very much. I know this has been a challenging time for you guys as we've gone through all of the pandemic issues and things like that, and the move to virtual schools. So I want to commend you very much for all of the work that you're doing and continuing to do in this area. I do have a few quick comments. So one, you talked a lot about data. I would like to see, as we come up with these other quarterly reports, some specific goals and how are we progressing toward those goals. I recognize you're in the middle of doing all of that right now, so it's fine, but I think that is something that is very key. And I think one of the key goals is how can we recover the lost ground, because I'm sure there's lost grounds. I see shaking heads, so I know you all agree with that. And I guess the other thing I'd like to emphasize, because throughout all the presentation I really didn't see it, to me the one critical thing in the Innovation Network that we have to get right is reading levels at fourth grade. Because unless we get reading levels at fourth grade right, it is going to continue to plague us as those kids go forward. Not plague us, continue to plague the kids as those go forward. So I urge you very strongly to really have a focus on early childhood education, on particularly early childhood reading, and give us some specific goals and specific targets in those areas. I know we don't have test scores from this year. I realize that that's not possible, but hopefully we'll have test scores coming up in the spring. So I encourage you very much to really hone in on graduation rates are great. There's no problem with that. That's something we really need to do. But a harder task is really focusing on those early childhood targets, and particularly fourth grade reading. So I just want to emphasize that to you guys, and hopefully that you can build that in as a key framework in all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Godet. And
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Ms. Dyson was in the.
I'm not in the queue, but I'm gonna go and then I'll acknowledge Ms. Dyson. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Thank you, Dr. Petrie and Mr. Perry, for your presentation. I think my question is partially getting at some of what Mr. Gode was just speaking of about the learning loss piece. And I know that, and I talked to Ms. Oconsi today about the consistency in data today as we make or build out a plan to address learning loss. So what are we using at this moment? Because students are in school. Like, what are we using to assess like where students are coming back into the district at, and how are we properly preparing to move them to where we need them to be?
All right, great question. Right now, we're using the diagnostic data that we received from D360. We also are progress monitoring the learning of our students using the end of unit assessments. So they're taking their first assessment, I want to say this week, that should have covered the first unit. But also back to the point about the learning loss piece and the fluency piece, we had a PD, I want to say a week or two ago, on measuring learning loss. And one of the big pieces that we focused on was the kids at 30%. So we focused on with our teachers and our leaders on how do you capture those kids who are 30%, and how do we plan for those interventions. So we gave them some resources as far as for I want to say K through 5 on how to do some fluency building checks and the progress monitor those fluencies. So we are doing that as far as, we're doing this right now as far as trying to build those kids up, because we noticed in the data that the reading is an issue, and also mathematical practice is an issue as well. So we're doing some fluency right now with our kids to get them up to that scaffold level.
Thank you. And I think that it just needs to be not only an innovation network priority, but kids have been out of school since March, so there is a high need to address learning loss. We already knew or know where achievement gaps were before COVID, so this is only adding on to it. And so before we do anything to plan a year out, to do all of these things that we're doing, I think that you guys are doing phenomenal work. But I think that at district-wide, there needs to be a district-wide approach to learning loss and making sure that it's a priority and just not something that we say we're going to do, but we're very practical and intentional about. Because if we're not, like, we are literally going to lose a generation of kids because of what happened with this pandemic. And so we have to be very careful, like, how we are addressing learning loss, because a lot of districts are like kind of just trying to plan. And I know it's in the crazy times in the middle of a pandemic, but we have to see where kids are, figure out what we need to do to be intentional about getting them to where we need them to be. So I appreciate the work that you guys are doing, and I just hope that we as a district can prioritize not just Innovation Network schools, but all of our schools, and add more schools like we were supposed to do to the Innovation Network. So thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Ms. Dyson.
I wave.
Ms. Collins.
I forgot to jot down one of my first questions. I apologize. With my MSAP schools, I'm trying to make sure, because when we started this journey with the Innovation Network, that was getting started at the same time. And the goal was to leverage both resources for all the kids on the campus. My concern is that it's almost, based on feedback that I do continue to get, it's almost as if the programs are competing with one another. And I know that folks can figure out how to not make a principal double work to accomplish both goals effectively and efficiently, because we don't want to stress the school leaders out, because that trickles down to the whole campus. And so I just want to lift up that concern. I know everybody's working hard. I know sometimes it's hard to figure out best ways to marry two programs, but I really hope that y'all can figure that out. One program is not better than the other. MSAP not better than Innovation Network, or vice versa. And so what's the best way to support the principal without them or their staff double working? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. Is there anyone else in the queue, Ms. Orman? No. All right, we will now move to our items for consideration. Our first item for consideration are professional service contracts. There's a consideration of a request for the approval of the professional service contracts between the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board and the following: the Achievement Network in the amount of $125,000 to provide professional development and support. The funding source is school redesign. Savas Learning Company, LLC, in the amount of $19,950 to provide professional development and support. Funding source, school redesign. The Writing Revolution in the amount of $114,884 to provide professional development and support. Funding source, school redesign. The Writing Revolution in the amount of $93,648 to provide professional development and support. The funding source is Title II. Presence Learning Incorporated in the amount of $70,000 to provide online teletherapy and teleassessments training sessions for employees of exceptional student services. The funding source is CARES Act Strong Start. Humanities AMP in the amount of $33,200 over a 2-year period, $16,600 per year per the 21st Century Community Learning Center grant for the McKinley High School. Funding source, 21st Century Grant. Louisiana Workforce Commission to provide a JAG specialist at Glen Oaks High, McKinley High, Tara High, and Glen Oaks Middle. The funding source is Louisiana Workforce Commission. I so move that this occurs. I entertain a second. Seconded by Mr. Gode. Moved by Mr. Howard, seconded by Mr. Gode. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Ms. Collins.
I'm having a little trouble. I did teach 1 little year, and it was long enough for me to say many years ago. But the little bit that I remember from the experience, as I was listening to the Innovation Network presentation and what some of the partners are doing, I'm struggling to be able to understand, contextually understand key differences between what the rest of the schools are doing and the Innovation Network. I hear talks of data, et cetera, coaching the principals, being a support to the principals. And so then for the next meeting, because I would like to be able to see a comparison of, okay, this is what we mean by leadership support, and this is what we traditionally do with all of our schools. This is what makes Innovation Network uniquely different, and this is why we need a ANET or whoever. And I'm not asking that as to say that I see no value in what's happening. I do, but I need to be able to better understand why we need to pay somebody else to do something that I don't, my limited understanding, and I'm honestly putting it on my limited understanding, that I don't understand what's the reason for cutting the check. And so if the next meeting, I could get some basic comparison of some significant difference, so I can better understand the value of that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. Are there any additional questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, are there any public comments? If you're in the room and you would like to make a public comment, fill out a card and come to the mic. There are no online comments. We'll go back to the board. Any questions or comments from the board? Madam Secretary.
Please vote.
The motion carries. At this time, we will move to item number 2 for consideration. It is a memorandum of understanding for Family Engagement Lab. Consideration of a request for the approval of a memorandum of understanding between the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board and Family Engagement Lab to provide web-based family engagement service. The funding source is the Louisiana Department of Education. At this time, I'll entertain a motion. So moved by Mr. Gode and second by Mr. Lannis. Mr. Smith, could you just give us a brief overview of what this grant entails to do with family engagement?
Thank you. This is a web-based program where families in our elementary school students select schools where they can communicate with their parents in their native language around curriculum and student progress. It's a pilot that the state is offering to us with guidebooks. And I think it'll be a valuable resource for our parents, especially our ELL students, diverse learners.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are there any additional questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we will move to the audience. Are there any comments from the audience? Seeing none, we'll go back to the board. Additional questions or comments? Seeing none, Madam Secretary.
Please vote. The motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We'll now move to our item number 3 for consideration. It is the revised 2019-2020 high school summer school budget. It is a consideration of the request of the approval of the revised 2019-2020 high school summer school budget. At this time, I'll entertain a motion. So moved by Mr. Landis, seconded by Mr. Ballou. Are there any questions or comments regarding the high school summer school budget from the board? Seeing none, we will go to the audience. Any comments from the audience? Seeing none, back to the board. There are no public comments online. Madam Secretary.
Please vote. The motion carries.
Thank you. We will now move to item number 4 for consideration. It is the construction of La Bel Air building addition. It is a consideration of a request for the authorization of staff to advertise, accept the low bids meeting specifications, and make the award of a contract for construction of La Bel Air Elementary School building addition, or reject any and all bids for just cause in accordance with the Louisiana Public Bid Law, the Louisiana Revised Statutes, Title 38, Chapter 10. The funding source is the Phase 4 Tax Plan Proposition 1. At this time, I'll entertain a motion. So moved by Ms. Collins, second by Mr. Ballou. Are there any questions or comments from the board regarding the construction of La Bel Air building addition? Mr. Goder.
Yes, I would, I see him standing up already. Just give us a brief overview, because it's been several years since the tax plan was put together, so I'd like to just have a brief overview of the project. Thank you,
Mr.
sir.
Williams.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The La Bel Air addition is they wanted a flex space. After talking to Ms. Ross, the request was for a flex space where they could have some classroom functions and also have performances and things like that. So it's a flex space, basically an open space that they can use and facilitate how they want. It's going to be big enough to hold 200 occupants. In the building also, there's going to be 2 classrooms at 800 square feet apiece. So we're going to give them some more of space there. There's also going to be teacher planning area. We're going to look at providing portable stage and the stage that they can use and the furniture that is required for those spaces. And also, we talked to them about trying to introduce some 21st century learning elements. So here we're going to look at having some exterior learning opportunities for the students. So not only can you use it in a flexible manner inside, you can also extend that to the adjacent exterior, which based off of the preliminary site studies by the architect, it'll be in a nice spot on the campus that would give them that nice opportunity to have that. So it's a 5,500 square foot building. And I don't know if there are any other questions about that.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Ms. Collins. Are you done, Mr. Goder?
Yeah, my only question was, is there already an auditorium at that school?
Okay.
There is, I don't know if I think there is some sort of multi-purpose space I don't know if it's it's not a classroom flexible space. The comparison that we've
No,
been
sir.
using is
No auditorium.
similar to the Wild Space at Lee High School. That's just a big box where they can, there's a lot of plug-ins and a lot of data capabilities where they could come in and do as they need for whichever lesson or whatever subject needed to use it.
To answer Mr. Goday's question, there isn't an auditorium at La Bel Air.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Thank you, Mr. Gode. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Dyson. You were first, Ms. Dyson.
I wanted to, I don't know if Mr. Crochet is here or Ms. Lopez. I want to ask both of you some questions, please. So while she's coming up, Mr. Williams, how does this play out in the scheduled sequence that we're supposed to be following with our tax plan as stated in our book?
Yes, ma'am. So, part of our responsibility and which has been our responsibility from the start of the tax plan is to keep track of the schedule. And so, we follow the schedule. These two projects that are on the agenda tonight are year 2 projects, which are, the schedule is to start design in 2020. So we are on schedule, and so what we do, we have some preliminary conversations with the accounting department to make sure the funds are there, and then most of the time in our bi-weekly facilities meeting, we make the executive team aware of, the money's there, the schedule says that we're supposed to begin these projects, and we ask for authorization to start those projects.
And so I know with Broadmoor Middle, we came to the board and we opted to hold on it and get it back in at some point when we know exactly what the board approves to do with that space. But then we went to the board with that, and then we went to the tax plan and got approval. And I'm just thinking, have we bypassed something else that we have not gone back to the board to do?
The only item per the schedule that has not been addressed by the board is the land purchase.
And it was supposed to come before these two,
That's correct.
and we're just bypassing?
I'm not sure what we're doing with that. That's not,
And I'd like to know, so where are we with the available funds for the one that we're bypassing?
I'll let Ms. Lopez,
The
Give
10
some
million
more.
for the land purchase for the tax plan for the land purchase is available. That money is available. Each project is a pay-as-you-go. These two projects, La Bel Air and Belfair, the funding is available.
So the funding is available for the land acquisition in the southern part of our parish, and yet we just need to decide on the property and go for it, right? So we've got the money to do it, and we can't just, like bypass it and forget. So paying for these now isn't going to take, they've got their money already earned as well, or
That's correct.
collected as well.
just a little information. As you see in the tax plan, there are going to be some larger significant projects. And kind of the design of the tax plan is
Right.
that, we're going to facilitate and make sure that, the smaller value projects are fit in with some larger ones. So, as it worked out here, we're still able to fit those small projects in.
All right, I just want to, again, just make sure that we know that there's a sense of urgency with that site being on that land, because we have crowded schools and overpopulated areas where they don't have any schools, and we can't just carry on and not, this board needs to act.
So to your point, from our office, what the executive team and superintendent are gonna get soon are, notices to say, we're about to be, well, actually, in June, you'll be in year 3. So by that point, we're gonna say, by this schedule, the new elementary school in the southern part, there needs to be a decision made there, so you'll have 2 at that point.
So what I don't want to happen is that this delay that we're having on this aspect of it, this first initial phase of it, delay the other parts. I'd like to somehow make sure that we catch it back up. Is that feasible?
Yes.
So we just need
You just have to make a decision on.
we just need to go for it, and then we can stay on track with the other parts of it?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm going to speak briefly at Ms. Dyson, just to give you a little more clarity.
Okay.
The purchase of the southern properties, the properties in the southern part of the parish was scheduled for 1920. Last Oversight Committee meeting was still in the first year. We have a meeting coming up on the 19th, I believe, of October. My plan was to speak with the board president, Mr. Howard, to communicate to the rest of the board that because we're now officially in year 2, it is time now to bring that purchase to the Oversight Committee to ask that they reschedule it for this year. So the appropriate way to handle this would be to go through the Oversight Committee, have them consider it, reschedule it, because now we are a year after the initial purchase should have happened. So now it's time to have the Oversight Committee consider that project in the same way they considered the Broadmoor Middle project several months ago, I think at the last meeting. So it's going to be my recommendation to the board that we go ahead and make a request of the Oversight Committee to reschedule that project to allow that purchase to happen in year 2.
But I want to make that contingent on the ability to catch it back up on what else was supposed to be happening with that project. I mean, I don't want the building, the students in the building any later than what we originally planned.
So in other words, Marcus, if I may jump in, the only project that's in this tax plan that has a direct correlation or effect to another project is the purchase of the property, correct?
When you're talking about those projects, but there are other projects that are related to each other. And one of them we're working on now is the University Terrace. But
in reference to delaying, you must have the land before you can start the
That's
construction
correct.
of the school.
And also, Ms. Dyson, in moving the Broadmoor Middle project, that did help out and to, factor into some of the, I'll let Ms. Lopez talk about tax collections, but, there was some concern there, but effectively moving that project alleviated some of that urgency and that possibility of having projects get off.
Okay. Can you remind me when we're supposed to open those schools?
If we begin design for this new elementary school in 2020, it'll most likely be a couple years after that. So you go into design for 12, 18 months, and then you're under construction for 18, 24 months, just estimating. So it'll be 2023. The schedule is based off of initiating the project. So the tax plan schedule factors in the funds that are available at a certain time. So we have it scheduled all the way out, and that's how we have to do it. So you're not taking the full brunt of the project budget in that 1 year. It's really spread out over 3 years.
So, again, just to make sure I understand and our viewing audience does as well, when we look at that calendar and when things are supposed to be happening, there won't be any, if we go ahead, do you know when we need to have it purchased by in order to stay on that schedule?
We can look
is
at
planned?
that. We can look at that.
Okay.
I'll have to provide that to you.
Okay. Because I think we all need to know that that community needs that faster than we even planned. So I know this board member is not going to be receptive to backing it up. If we back up this part, we have to somehow catch it back up. Okay, thank you so much.
No problem.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Dyson. Ms. Collins.
I just wanted to say I am pleased that we're able to move forward on the LaBelle Air, and of course Belfair too, because they have a great need for their upper grades. But at LaBelle Air, I know every year they do this big cultural diversity event, and they do it on the basketball court outside. Okay, but it's their mom, dad, community partners, and so this space would be so great for that. I mean, they have the Chinese dragon and everything. It's a beautiful thing, and so I'm glad that they'll be able to have a better space for those types of activities.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. Ms. Bernard.
I also wanted to ask about the middle school component in Scotlandville. It seems like that is also supposed to be done this year. Are those funds also reserved and
Those funds are available as well.
Okay. So just want to make sure that we're not getting off schedule too much, because one of the things that we've always been able to say to the taxpayers is that we did what was in the plan. So when we deviate from the plan, it causes people to question, you know. But thank you.
Mr. Lannis.
Awesome work by CSRS. And also, I didn't get a chance to give gratitude for the people that came up and spoke earlier. However, I think I'll be remiss if I didn't bring something up. Now, I don't want to be the controversial guy, but I think it's important that I say this because we're talking about urgencies of schools. Now, in my district, I don't have a standalone middle school. I haven't had one since we relinquished Glen Oaks Middle School to the RSD, or to the state. I came to 7 board members. I had conversations with them about possibly getting a property right next door to one of my elementary schools, because I have 6 elementary schools in my district within a 1-mile radius of each other, give or take, and there's no middle school for them to feed into. So what's the problem that's happening? The students have to go across town to get into a proper or effective school. But we're talking about urgency inside of some districts, and we're also teetering on the fence without using certain words. But I just wanted to bring that up when we talk about urgency, because we talk about taxpayer dollars. The taxpayers in that district have been waiting for a middle school for I don't know how long. The middle school that we currently have there is on Glen Oaks High School's campus. That school has continuously not met the state's requirements to be considered an effective school. There's a problem, we have a hole, and we need to fix it. I think this is a conversation that we need to be bringing up and talking about quite a bit, because we're losing a huge sector of our students. They don't have a choice where to go in the district. And I only ask this because this can't continue the way that we've been doing it. It's already part of the tax plan. It's something that needs to happen. At least let the conversation take place. Because these parents need to know that they have something in their areas where they don't have to send their kids on the other side of town. Because we're talking about packing schools. We're talking about under-enrolled schools, and this is leading to it. But I just want to say that for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lannis. Ms. Bernard.
I appreciate my colleague for highlighting the need for schools in every part of town. I have District 8, which has 2 elementary schools and a combined elementary middle school. Probably not ideal for a lot of logistical reasons, but there's never been a high school in my district. And according to the demographer, when we were making the tax plan, he said that the fastest growth in the school district was in District 8 and pointed to the south of Burbank, Bluebonnet area, right in the heart of District 8, and that the second fastest growth was out in the Woodlawn area, beyond Airline Highway, closer to Ascension Parish. And I feel it is very urgent, and I do appreciate my colleagues who have highlighted the needs for schools for the children to attend. I think that my area of town also has the highest participation in private schools, probably because they don't want to go from Nicholson Drive all the way to Terrell, which I don't know exactly how many miles, and Ms. Garrett isn't here to tell us that, but I'm sure she could give us that from memory. So thank you all for highlighting that.
Is there any additional questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we'll go to comments from the audience.
Mr. Howard, Mr. Lance.
Oh, he
wait, okay.
waves. Ms. Collins, are you good? You good? Okay. Any comments from the audience, from those who are present? Thank you, Mr. Williams and Ms. Lopez. Mr. Finney.
Thank you. I'm
Dr.
James
Finney.
Finney. You mentioned something about cards earlier. I'll be sure to fill one out at the end if you need one. I don't necessarily have a particular objection to this project, but I heard a couple things that were somewhat concerning. If there's a large, well, large-ish multi-purpose space being envisioned, but it's not big enough for the whole school, I'm not sure if that's worth several $1,000,000 if the whole school is a community. I'm also concerned about making sure that every space that exists at every school is used as wisely and effectively as it could be, because even though the tax plan exists, you're also elected to make careful fiduciary decisions, and if there is a better way to spend that money that can be effectively communicated to the public, I think deviating somewhat from the tax plan is reasonable. I would be interested in knowing what the demographics of the La Belle Air neighborhood are, if it's time to reopen Red Oak Elementary as an elementary school and put the alternative high school somewhere else. And I don't know the answer to that question, but before you keep expanding La Belle Air, which is somewhat landlocked, maybe there are other ways to address kids in that neighborhood's needs, and I would hope you explore that somewhat before you go too far down this path. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional comments from the audience who are present? Seeing none, I will move to online comments. There are no online comments regarding this item. Are there any additional questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, Madam Secretary. Oh, I can't see it.
Ms. Bernard.
Ms. Bernard, thanks.
Thank you. I neglected to mention that I was at Magnolia Woods on Monday, and I asked the principal for an update on the painting that has been going on over there. The classrooms at Magnolia Woods are so old and have not had any attention for such a long period of time that there are green chalkboards in most of the classrooms. They do not have a white board surface to write on. So one classroom was able to get a whiteboard surface, but we ran out of whiteboard material, so we couldn't give the rest of the teachers a whiteboard, a dry erase marker type whiteboard. I'm not talking about smart boards. The special ed class is meeting in the gymnasium because the T building that they were meeting in had rats in it, and that they had to, so they, normally a T building is a temporary building. It's supposed to be temporary, and when it gets to this point, you dispose of it. But in this parish, we have to reuse these buildings. So this building is so old and so decrepit that it wasn't suitable for our students. And those parents want their children in nice new classrooms also. So they are meeting in the gymnasium. The playground hasn't had an update in I don't know how long. It's really embarrassing that our children don't have better facilities than that. So they were painting and putting in new tiles in the T building for those students to be able to move back in there. I don't think you would send your students to school there.
Mr. Lannis.
Mr. Lannis, thank you, Ms. Armour.
Yes, so I heard some very concerning things. I'll say one, if there were any rats in any part of any building that we are over, that should have been reported a long time ago, because that's a serious hazard issue. The next thing I'll say is, I think that every single child, every single community, every single district in this parish deserves to have top quality schools. The only thing that I would say is, you can't preach and push urgency on one side of town when it's the same problem on the other side of town as well, especially when all of these dollars are allocated throughout the tax plan and is already scheduled. That's all.
Thank you. Hello. Mic check. Oh, here we go. Thank you, Mr. Lannis. Are there any additional questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, Ms. Arman, are we clear?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Orman. We have went to the audience. Madam Secretary.
Please vote. Sorry. Please vote. Motion carries.
Thank you. Our next item for consideration is the construction of Belfair Montessori Magnet School Building Addition. It is a consideration of a request for the authorization of staff to advertise, accept the low bid, meeting specifications, and make an award of contract for construction of the Belfair Montessori Magnet School Classroom Addition, or reject any and all bids for just cause in accordance with Louisiana Public Bid Law, Louisiana Revised Statutes, Title 38, Chapter 10. The funding source is also Phase 4 of this tax plan in Proposition 1. I'll move that this item goes forward. I'll take a second at this time. Seconded by Mr. Ballou. Are there any questions or comments from the? I did. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, any comments from the audience? Yes, sir.
Thank you. First off, let me say how much it warms my heart to see Ms. Bernard and Mr. Lannis in such close agreement on any issue. But beyond that, several years ago, as an incentive for them to get a renewal, CSRS promised a condition report, which several years after it was promised finally arrived, and I'm not sure that anything happened with it other than it being put on a shelf. I borrowed it, made some notes on it, but that's been several years. I would think that there are two things that need to happen before you spend much more in terms of capital improvement. And those are that you should get an updated condition report on all the real estate and facilities owned by the district. And then, more than a demographic study, you should have a pretty detailed discussion on how you're placing students and designing special programs, because I would think in an ideal world you would have schools in neighborhoods close to where kids live, so that in the absence of some compelling reason not to go to a neighborhood school, the kids can walk to their neighborhood school, walk or bike within reason to a nearby secondary school, and get all the programs that they would need, unless they have fairly unusual exceptionalities or special interests. And it seems as though when you give too much autonomy to principals, you end up with a bunch of little empires and you don't have a system anymore. It's the same issue I have with spending money on charter schools. You lose the efficiencies of scales and careful thinking and planning. But with this project in particular, as I understand it, you're contemplating additional middle school classrooms for a school that has 76 middle school students. And I don't expect that number realistically to improve, because as I understand it, most elementary Montessori students aspire to Sherwood or McKinley Middle. And building capacity that will never be used is probably not the best use of money. I would think about whether there are other places, even within a couple miles there, where that money could be better spent. Or maybe you should return Belfair to being a neighborhood school in addition to being a Montessori center, which is what my sense is of what the neighbors wanted before their wishes were ignored several years ago. So I would caution you to think hard before you spend this money just because it's mentioned in the tax plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments from the audience who are present? Seeing none, I will check the online comments.
Mr. Godey, did you waive?
Back to, there are no online comments, the board. Mr. Godey.
Yes, thank you. A little bit along the lines of Mr. Finney. This project is to accommodate middle school population. And I'm looking on the tax plan, and it's listed on the tax plan as Belfair Elementary. Was this the project that was envisioned when the tax plan was put together, that it was going to be middle school classrooms coming in? Because I don't remember that. And I will admit I have a very poor memory, but its project is listed as Belfair Elementary. And I cannot find anything that details what exactly that is, except now this says middle school. So I'm trying to understand that.
Yes, Mr. Godey, when we were drafting and crafting this phase 4 tax plan, it was already a middle school. Currently, right now, the middle school students there are operating out of 3 modular buildings. And so part of the planning of this tax plan was to remove those middle school students out of the temporary buildings to add a permanent fixture there.
And how many, we have 3 modular buildings, and how many classrooms will this be building?
This is 9 classrooms. And
9 classrooms to replace 3 T buildings. I'm having trouble making that math work.
Part of the ability to grow the school is because we didn't have the additional space for middle school students.
Do we have a waiting list? for
Sure,
middle school?
Montessori, we do have a waiting list for Montessori.
At middle school?
Yeah, this is the only Montessori middle school that we have in the
But
parish.
there is, not
Yeah.
at elementary, but there's
Yeah,
a waiting list at
yeah.
middle school. Okay, I would like for, when this comes up in the regular meeting, because I plan on pulling this, I would like to see the details on the enrollment with that and the waiting list at middle school, because I worry that we're overbuilding something to make up for a tax plan that was put together 4 years ago. So I would really like to see some data justifying 9 classrooms at that site for middle school, when I'd like to see what the demand is for that.
Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Goder. Are there any additional questions or comments from the board?
Ms. Dyson?
Ms. Dyson.
I have a question about the numbers as well, and I'm wondering how, and somebody needs to help me here, how close is Belfair to where there's not a traditional middle school? Could the Montessori be a program within a school at the middle school that Mr. Lannis is saying we need?
I'm not sure. I'm not the one to answer that question.
I mean, I don't know the geography as well, so I'm trying to figure out how close is, you know, I mean, could we incorporate that as a program at a traditional middle school that's needed? And we need to think about the best place for that and, again, not bypass anything, but just, you know, work smart. I don't know, do you know, Mr. Lannis, how close that those students may be?
So, this is what I will say. The idea that we came up with, and Mr. Smith, you can chime in because you were part of previous to those conversations. I think it is the smartest plan that we're currently already using. One, the building is already structurally sound because of how it was already designed. It's so close in proximity to the school that literally we're not building a new school or really creating a new school. The only thing we're doing is we are building a middle school component to the elementary school, and the elementary school would be Forest Heights, which is a blue ribbon school. It's literally 5 feet away from the school in its walking distance. Everything we talked about prior to the tax plan and the problems that they had at the school, one of which is the multipurpose space, that provides it because they have the space there. We have $4 million already allocated in the tax plan to get it done, and the property doesn't cost nearly as much as the money we have, so that leaves us enough dollars to build it out and do everything that we need to do.
I'm not speaking about that. I'm speaking about the middle school that is in the tax plan, that is for the kids and others that are being bused to Park Forest.
Are you talking about the Skylandville area?
I am. I think
Yeah,
that I
those,
am.
the Skylandville and Belfair are pretty far apart. Like they're not even in comparison to, like, I don't even know what's close, but Skylandville is on one end of Baton Rouge and Belfair is coming towards Mid-City and all this area. So they're on two different sides of town.
Almost close to Central.
Yeah, like it's two different sides of the region and the parish.
And so you don't think it's feasible to meet in the middle somewhere?
The problem I have with that is we can have the conversation about programs within programs again on one side of town, but when we bring up the conversation about adding a traditional wing to Lee High School, everybody goes numb and everybody goes silent. So what we're saying is that if that's going to be the model that this is, as a board we take, we need to make sure it's equitable across the district, because there are some things that we can do on both sides of town to bake so we are using our efficiencies properly. But we can't just have this conversation about Belfair, a school in my district, and not have that same conversation about Lee when Ms. Bernard just sit right here and talked about the need for space on her area, in her area of her side of town. So we just have to decide as a board, what is our plan? If it's going to be programs within programs, so be it. But it has to be equitably distributed across both sides of town. I don't want to have this conversation about Belfair, and I can't have it about Lee. That's
No,
what this board member feels
I
like.
think we can.
Well, we should.
I think we can.
And I can
I've asked for it too.
But the idea is that we create sustainable community schools. Building somewhere in the middle doesn't create a sustainable community school if the kid still has to wake up at a certain amount of time early in the morning to be bused on the other side of town. That defeats the purpose of everything that we've been talking about as a board since I've been here at least. We've all been talking about building sustainable community schools right in the students' backyards. Yet we're still doing the same thing we've been doing since the inception of the board. That just makes no sense to me.
So it seems like we are prime for, let's, make some decisions on that middle school, where we want it to be. I think there was some potential of a charter school and some work with RSD on a site. I think those discussions, the land acquisition and that discussion are just prime. We need to go ahead and further those discussions.
But this is the only thing with that.
And
With
this
the
will be our
land
last
acquisition-
comment unless you want to be
I'm sorry.
recognized.
Oh, I thought I was
Go ahead.
in the queue.
You go ahead.
Oh, okay. So the problem with that is when we talk about urgency, the part of the part of the plan that takes place in my particular district happens next year. When we talk about land acquisition, that's something that happens years down the line. So when you talk about urgency, when we begin to talk about urgency, we're not even having those conversations right now. We're talking about what's needed in individual districts based off what money we have allocated inside of the tax plan.
I guess we can talk offline at some point. The land acquisition, I think, we're late on it.
No, I'm not talking about the land acquisition. I understand that part.
Oh,
I was
okay.
talking about the actual building of the properties and where that would come up inside of the tax plan.
Thank you, Mr. Lannis. Thank you, Ms. Dyson.
Thank you.
Mr. Shamler.
I'm going to jump in for just a minute. I want to remind the board that we have a tax plan that was approved by the voters of the parish, vetted through those voters in various district meetings. So when you guys begin to talk about changes, I can understand programmatic changes, but where and how we build buildings, just remember your constituents spoke specifically about what they expected, and they voted on it and it was approved. So be cautious about it. And I have to say that as council, be cautious about discussing major changes to the plan, because the oversight committee will have to be consulted and will have to approve any major change that steps outside of the major steps and requirements of the tax plan. That's just a reminder as we kind of have this discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Shamler. Any additional questions or comments from the board? Mr. Smith.
Mr. Godey.
Thank you. Thanks for all the board members for their conversation, because it's leading up to a point that I think we all are going to need to address. One of my fears with the tax plan as it was put together, some of the board members were not on the board at the time of the tax plan, and B, the tax plan was put together in my mind without a real strategic plan to back it up. And previous tax plans had been replacing buildings that were falling apart and things like that, so it was pretty simple. But this tax plan is getting to the arena where we're starting to get into issues around what is the strategic plan of the parish, of the school system going forward. You know, there are things like we need a new school in southern part of Baton Rouge. One of the prime examples of the lack of strategic plan is the fact that Broadmoor Middle is sitting there empty and we don't know what to do with it. But that was in year one of the tax plan. And we don't know what the heck we're going to do with it and still don't have a plan. And we had 5 different options that came up. So I'm saying this, I think all of these discussions are worthy, but I think all of these discussions are worthy after we come up with a strategic plan. And I know we've had some issues right now with COVID and other issues that we need to face, but in the next few months, I think we're going to need to, I think the plan is to put a concerted push on the strategic plan, and all of these issues that we're talking about here are really strategic plan issues. What middle school should we have? Where should it be located? Should we have this Montessori? Should we do all of these things? Because we're living with a plan that was set 4 years ago. Basically, before the flood was when this was mostly set. Populations have changed and everything else. So, and we, like Mr. Shanlin said, we have to be very cognizant of the fact that it was approved by the voters, and it needs, we don't have the ability to change these. Only the Oversight Committee has the ability to change these. So if we want to do some changes, and some changes may very well be needed in this, we need to come up with a very coherent, concise, focused strategic plan that we can go out and sell to the public and go out and sell to the Oversight Committee, because one-offing these things is not going to work. It's not, we're not going to be able to change these. And so I think there's a lot of work that we need to do as a board to come up with this, to reset our strategic plan, and then look back and say, how does the tax plan match the strategic plan, and where are the issues? And are those issues we want to go attack and change? Because I'm not married to what's in the tax plan, other than the fact I can't change it unless I got a really good reason and convince the public and convince the Oversight Committee that we need to change it. So that's just my speech for today, but I appreciate everyone's views. I think all of those are valid, but we're going to have some work cut out for us to do that, and it begins with coming up with a coherent, focused strategic plan.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard. Mr. Smith.
Mr. Lannis?
Well, Mr. Smith,
Oh,
you
sorry.
wanted
Yeah.
to say something?
Thank you, and I just wanted to add, as far as along with the Montessori, we all know that Montessori is a different philosophy of learning. Just a few years ago, we had to eliminate a program at Dufrock, the academic magnet, because we didn't have enough space for the Montessori parents. And Dufrock goes from grades pre-K to 5. And so with Belfair, along with some of those spaces, are spaces for middle school programming, like art, the elective space. And so it's not just totally classroom spaces, just spaces for that would generally a middle school school would have for the electives.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Mr. Lannis.
Yes. And I would say if we had to agree on anything tonight, the agreement would be that it is a sense of urgency to get these things done. So the question would be, I'm in full agreement. We need a strategic plan. We should have had it, that should already be geared up, ready to go in terms of us talking about it and dialoguing about it. But the question now is, when does that begin? Because a lot of these things, unfortunately, are just time sensitive. And when you're talking about a strategic plan, it's not something that happens in 1 week, 2 weeks. It takes months of dialoguing about it. And again, we're talking about urgency. And a lot of these things, we're going to miss some very good opportunities because there's nothing happening right now. There's no real traction that's taking place. A lot of these conversations have already begun inside of the communities that we're talking about. We've already talked to these school leaders. We already talked to the parents. We already identified space. And even when you talk about changing the plan, the parts that I'm talking about specifically doesn't cause for us having to go to the Oversight Committee. That came from our former superintendent, when I talked to everyone else, it was already understood that when we bring it up, it needs to come before the board. But my only question is, I'm not even saying, this has to be the end-all, be-all. I'm just saying, let's have the conversation, because we can't do anything before the conversation takes place. If you want the data, I can send the data to everyone. You want to see where it looks, the schematics of the building. You want to see the petition, the petition from the neighborhood association. If you want to see the surveys from the parents, I can give you all of that. I just want the conversation to begin, so then we can begin to start moving the wheels on a lot of these things.
Thank you, Mr. Lannis. Ms. Orman, are we clear? All right, are there any additional questions or comments from the board? Thank you, Mr. Williams. Thank you, Ms. Lopez. We have went to the audience. Madam Secretary.
Please vote. Motion fails.
Okay, so just as a point of order, Mr. Shamlin, because this motion has failed, what do we have to, as far as it being a part of the conversation, a part of the tax plan, a part of the timeline, do we have to reconsider it? And I just need to know the information for my own understanding.
Based on policy, we have to wait 60 days, but we bring the matter back to a board agenda. The action tonight was to allow bids, select the low bid, and extend the contract. So this is part of a project that's already been approved by the board. So I'm not really sure where you go if the board refuses to allow that step to take place when the project has already been approved. We'll have to review our process and see what the next logical steps would be. I would recommend sometime in December, bringing this matter back before the board once there's been further discussion to see if we can get consensus.
Thank you, Mr. Shamlin.
Yes, sir.
Our next item for consideration is litigation. It is a consideration of a request for the approval of the recommendation from Mr. Gwen Shamlin, General Counsel, East Baton Rouge Parish School Board, in the matter of Trina C.K. King versus the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board, docket number 674176, section 26, 19 Judicial District Court, Parish of East Baton Rouge, State of Louisiana, and to provide for related matters. There's a possibility there will be an executive session under the provisions of Louisiana Revised Statute 4217, A2, to discuss the following matter. Trina C. King versus the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board, docket number 674176, section 26, 19 JDC District Court, Parish of East Baton Rouge Parish, State of Louisiana, to provide for related matters. At this time, I entertain a motion. So moved by Mr. Gode, and I will second that motion. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, comments from the audience?
Thank you. I think anytime you have these litigation matters come before the board, it would be an appropriate gesture in the interest of public transparency if the backup reproduced the original petition and any other filings, because it would be interesting for the public to know what the school system is being sued for and for how much and why, and just the basics. And the petition is certainly open to the public, but I don't think it's reasonable to expect every member of the public to buy a copy from the clerk of court just to be informed as to school board business. Furthermore, I would hope before you vote on this that you have the Secretary of the General Counsel read the motion exactly, because the agenda item says something about related matters, and I want to know exactly what you're voting on. If it's just to accept the recommendation, or if it's just a yeah, whatever. And I might be picking on this agenda item, but that's my pet peeve every time you vote on something. There's an agenda item that may or may not be in the form that would make a good, clear, understandable motion, and somebody says so move and somebody says second, and down the road we're not clear exactly what the intent of the board was. So in this particular example, I would hope that you ask that motion be read so that you know exactly what you're voting on, even though you're all going to say yes. So, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional comments from the audience? Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, Madam Secretary.
Please vote. The motion carries.
All right, our next agenda item is the next meeting dates and announcements. Announcements of meetings. Our next regular board meeting will be held on October 15th, 2020 at 5 o'clock p.m. at this location, Professional Development Center. Oversight Committee meeting will be held on October 19th, 2020 at 5 o'clock p.m. at the central office. Some or all board members may attend. Committee of the Whole for November is scheduled for November the 5th, 2020 at 5 o'clock p.m. at the Professional Development Center. At this time, I move this meeting is adjourned.